This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
And good morning, Kentucky. You're listening to, and I should say Monday morning. Hopefully you guys have got the day started off on the right foot. You're listening to Kentucky's Voice, where we talk truth, tackle tough issues, and give you the insight that you deserve. I'm your host today, Bob Scott, and it is Monday, October the 27th. We've got a full show today with a special guest, Kentucky State Representative John Hodgson from the 36th District, part of, or I guess all of Jefferson County he has. We be covering everything from national security and geoengineering to Kentucky politics. Andy Beshear's recent European trip/vacation, and what's ahead in the 2026 general session. Let's get right into it because this morning we start with a topic that's been in the minds of intelligence officials and Americans alike, the growing threat of China to the U.S. national security. Please play the clip 0.
I was amazed and not a little bit concerned when we were doing research for our story on 60 Minutes about Chinese infiltration of computer networks in the United States, specifically the computer networks of utilities like water treatment plants and electric power plants. We went to one small town in Massachusetts, Littleton, Massachusetts, where the FBI told the plant managers there that their computer system had been hacked by the Chinese. Before the Chinese were able to get operational control of the water treatment plant, they were discovered and they were kicked out. But had they received operational control of the water treatment plant, they could have caused all kinds of havoc. We talked to a general recently retired named Tim Hawk, who used to run the National Security Agency. He's one of America's best cyber sleuths. And he told us the Chinese have been operating to get into U.S. utilities all across the country. It is an amazing story. I was amazed and not a little bit concerned when we were doing research for our story on 60 Minutes about China.
On a recent 60-minute report that he did. I was very happy to see that report. I usually don't see 60 Minutes going in and doing things like that. Of course, they were highlighting the multifaceted threat China poses, from cyber warfare to economic espionage and influence operations going on right now, right here in the United States. I'm going to very quickly bring in Representative Hodgson. And again, John, thank you for being on the show today. You're right on the cutting edge of understanding this. And this is a short segment, but I do want us to touch upon it and really keep it in people's minds.
Well, Bob, we've got a huge threat with China because they make a lot of the little chips that control things, everything from the thermostat in your house to water plants to utility plants. And we're not making a lot of chips in the United States right now. A lot of them are being made in China. Not a lot of the operating and control software is made over there. It's very easy for the manufacturer of those chips to put in some kind of a back door into those chips or into operating control software to allow them to take over, to sabotage it. And there's something called the Internet of Things, the IoT, where there are billions of chips out there that are, it's beyond just your cell phone and your, home router. Your refrigerator may have a chip in it. Your thermostat may have a chip in it. Your washing machine has a chip in it. And conceivably, all those things could be attaching to the internet via Wi-Fi and receiving instructions from somewhere else without your knowledge. It's a huge security risk.
It's real. I know during the Trump first administration, they found it that this was going on. What Scott Pelley was reporting on, and actually Trump issued an executive order to shut that down for a small period of time, because guess what? When Biden came into office, he rescinded that order. Anyway, we are about out of time for this segment. We're going to come right back with State Representative John Hodgson. When we do come back, we're going to pivot from geopolitics to something closer to home, the skies above us. Talking about geoengineering, what's really going on. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Kentucky's Voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm Bob Scott, joined today by Representative John Hodgson. The topic now, one that's gained growing attention, a topic that's also near and dear to State Representative John Hodgson's heart. It's concerning geoengineering, from weather modification experiments to atmospheric aerosol programs. People are now asking who's controlling the sky and why. And by the way, has anybody noticed that since this government shutdown has happened, that all of a sudden the skies just seem to be much clearer right now? And I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but what was considered a conspiracy theory in the past has now been shown to be a fact, F-A-C-T. I have a clip that I'd like to share with Lee Zeldin, chairman of the Environmental Protection Agency. Please play that.
You're talking about putting sulfur dioxide, a lot of it, for a long time, into the upper atmosphere, which turns into acid rain. There are real health concerns with regards to these activities. Now, in the case of stratospheric aerosol injection, it's not like it's thoroughly studied, it's approved, it's trusted. Instead, you have people who just want to do it on their own, like try to get themselves someone to hand over $1 billion to just go dump a whole bunch of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. And no, that doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound right. And it shouldn't happen. No. Everything that I know as the EPA administrator should be communicated transparently with the American public, whatever the answer is, wherever the facts lie. We posted last month on the EPA website, epa.gov/geoengineering, a lot of the answers I received on this topic. And there has been government funding that's gone towards some of these efforts. There are entities and people who would want to drastically scale these activities up. My goal is to fix everything out of the gate.
And of course, that was Lee Zeldin. He's the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, from a recent interview he did with Glenn Beck. Here's the deal, folks. There's a lot of things that's been going on in our country that finally, are being exposed and brought to the light. And it's something that is a commitment that we have here at Kentucky's Voice. And that's one of the advantages of a show like Kentucky's Voice, is we're here for you. You're going to hear things on this programming that you're not going to hear anywhere else in the state of Kentucky. We are proudly conservative and Christian, and we're not afraid to tell it like it is. In fact, if you want to join in today's program, you see the number at the bottom of the screen. Please text us or send where you can send a comment or just anything else that's on your mind at 502-571-0970. Again, that phone number or text line number is 502-571-0970. Now's your chance. I've got one of the foremost experts in the state of Kentucky on a lot of things, but State Representative, but he really knows his stuff on geoengineering. Let's jump right into it. John Hodgson, again, honor always to have you on, sir. I do seriously appreciate your insight. You're not afraid to really bring forth the truth. What's your take? I already kind of know half of it, but your take on geoengineering programs, real or proposed, and their potential impact on agriculture here in Kentucky and really the health of all Kentuckians.
Well, let's talk at a couple of levels here. Part of the Green New Deal, people are convinced in the United Nations and other global entities that the earth is too hot and we need to cool it off. And in their God-denying hubris, they think, well, we can take care of that as human beings. We can just cool the earth off ourselves. So they have proposed what's called stratospheric aerosol injection, SAI, where they go into the high upper atmosphere. This is way above where you would do any cloud seeding. And they would spray reflective materials like, let's say, sulfur dioxide or aluminum flakes up into the upper atmosphere with the intention of blocking sunlight. Now, that's way worse than modifying weather, because we're talking about reducing the number of photons that hit the earth. Everything on the earth is basically powered by sunlight.
Yeah.
That's how the Earth, we would be a cold ash in outer space if it wasn't for sunlight in this. We had a volcano erupt back in about 1815 that sent sulfur dioxide into the upper atmosphere and created what they call the year with no summer, because there was so much ash in the upper atmosphere that it never got warm enough to grow crops in the proper way. So there were famines, all over the earth as a result of that. And so we don't know what happens, due to natural processes. Well, we got some guys that have so much hubris they think they can play God, control the weather, and they're going to spray something in the upper atmosphere to cool the earth off. Well, that's potentially catastrophic for us. But even experiments with that, even if they want to see if it works a little bit, to spray sulfur dioxide in the upper atmosphere, it'll probably stay up there for a long time, months, maybe years.
Yeah.
But when it comes down, it eventually comes down as acid rain. If they use aluminum flakes, that eventually comes down. They even talked about something more benign like seawater, with the salt crystals reflecting light. But the whole goal of stratospheric aerosol injection is to block sunlight from reaching the earth. Now, what does that do to things like agriculture and crops? You don't get enough sunlight, you don't make a crop. You have a famine. We have an increasing reliance on solar power in some areas. If you block some of the sunlight, you don't make as much solar power. I've got solar panels on my roof, and if you remember the Canadian wildfires a couple of years ago, well, my electricity production was down 25% for the whole year because there was so much smoke in the air from the Canadian wildfires. So these things have an impact on us. They can even be used as weapons of war. We have a monitoring station in the Rocky Mountains to make sure the Chinese aren't doing something like this to us just to cut our Western United States solar production. So that's stratospheric aerosol injection, fooling around in the upper atmosphere. The Biden White House actually published a paper. This was available on the internet, official government sources saying, hey, we think this might be a great idea. Let's go research this and take a look at it. Congress actually asked, the Democrat Congress, I should specify, asked the Biden White House to look into stratospheric aerosol injection. And they published a white paper and said, here's all the good things it could do for us. Let's take a look at that. And one of the first things Trump did when he came in was to rescind to that paper and said, no, we're not going to look at that. Lee Zeldin is trying to expose some of that foolishness. But there are people in the United Nations and non-governmental organizations and billionaires that they think they can play God and control the temperature of the earth, and they want to experiment with this. So the bill that we've got proposed, Senator Steve Rawlings and I said, we are not going to experiment over the skies of Kentucky with this sort of thing. We've got something like 23 other states have similar proposed legislation. Tennessee and Florida have passed it and says if you do that without on your own without authorization, which we're not going to give authorization, but it's a $500,000 fine and a Class D felony. So that should dissuade from trying to do such an experiment. There's another thing.
Is this something that ought to also be addressed more aggressively on the federal level and just say,
yeah,
no more?
Yeah, absolutely. If I build a fire in Kentucky, the smoke's going to go into Tennessee and Indiana.
Yeah.
But I think the states are doing this as an expression of state sovereignty, saying we don't control the world, but we control our state and the sky over our state, and don't be putting chemicals out here trying to play God and alter the Earth's heat. But we really need it done not just at federal level, but at the international law level, just to say this is crazy. Stop fooling around with this stuff. We had volcanoes, like I say, do this in the 1800s that almost plunged the world into a famine. But the other thing that happens a little lower down. Is rainmaking. That's attempts to make clouds rain more. We've known how to do that since 1946. That's when the first patents were granted. Not a new thing. They tried to do it as a weapon of war, the Vietnam War, to make it rain on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That's now disclosed on the new EPA website. But the idea of rainmaking is you go up into cumulus clouds, the puffy-looking clouds,
and seed them.
Have a lot of water in them, and seed them. With silver iodide, which mimics the shape of an ice crystal. And if there's water in that puffy cloud, just a handful of silver dioxide may make it rain more. Now, they do this on purpose out west, and about 8 different states give licenses for this. That's states that don't have enough water, and they're trying to make it rain on agricultural areas or especially over ski areas. Big business in the wintertime is skiing. So they'll send a drone up into a cloud about 15,000 feet. They'll seed it with silver iodide and try to make it snow more. To my knowledge, there are no licenses granted for that in Kentucky. We don't even have a body of law for that. But it would be in the puffy cumulus clouds you see, those cotton candy looking clouds that you see in the summertime. If the ones that are heavy and dark and have a lot of water in them, those are potential candidates. SAI is done up at 35,000 to 50,000 feet where you're spraying chemicals to block sunlight. Cloud seeding to make it rain is done at about 15,000 feet and lower.
Yeah, we have a little over a minute to go in this segment. You mentioned, I know you've tried to get legislation passed here before. You've been at the tip of the spear leading that charge. Where are we at now? Are we at a point that finally something can be done about this and addressed?
Well, we'll be hearing in front of the Environmental Committee this summer. Chairman Gooch heard us. Senator Steve Rawlings and I went in there. We took my local weatherman, Randy Baker, with us, who's got a lot of meteorological experience, and we testified for about 20 minutes, explained to him what was going on in the bill that they had, and got a very favorable reception from that committee.
Good.
So I hope that will foretell a favorable reception when the session starts. The bill's got to be assigned to committee. Committee chairman has to agree to hear it. It's got to pass committee, then it's got to go to the House, and then repeat the whole process in the Senate. But we have a House and Senate sponsor working on this together. It's the second year we've had it out there, so I'm optimistic that we'll get somewhere. We know Florida and Tennessee have passed a very similar law, so it's in effect down there.
That's fascinating stuff. Kentucky politics are definitely heating up and getting involved. Stay tuned. We'll be right next with Senate race businessman Nate Morris and talking about his race.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And so Nate, taking out the trash in Washington, D.C. is being demanded by the voters of Kentucky and across the country. Besides replacing the Republican McConnell establishment in Kentucky, you've also said that you are pledging to deport every single illegal immigrant in America. Very quick comment on that.
Well, Charlie, our country's been in a crisis because of the border. And thank goodness for President Trump, who sealed our border. And the next step we have to take is we have to have this moratorium. We have to deport every single one of Joe Biden's 20 million illegals that have invaded our country. And we can have no new immigration until they all go back. We're full. We're absolutely full. And the amnesty that's being pushed now by Republicans and Democrats is treasonous. Amnesty is treason. And we have to remember that. If we don't have a border, we don't have a country. And it's America that's at stake, but it's also Western civilization. If America goes, the hope of the world is gone.
Nate Morris, thank you for your time. You have a big task ahead of you. It's the first time that Senate race has been open since 1984, that Senate seat since 1984. Mitch McConnell's been there for a while. Nate Morris, thank you so much.
And that, of course, was the dear departed Charlie Kirk. Not long before his tragic assassination, he was actually guest hosting on Fox and Friends. I believe it was a Saturday and Sunday that he did. And it just absolutely brings a tear and chills to my spine each time I see a video of his. And, you know, researching for this show, I found I never saw that clip, but it does fit in perfectly with our topic. Charlie did go on to endorse Nate Morris for the Senate race, which to me was a pretty big deal, you know, because nobody knew nationally who Nate Morris was. Well, they suddenly did. And Kentucky's Voice was there to cover the Nate Morris announcement when he was rolling out with Charlie Kirk. Candidly, most of the people who came to that event were there to see Charlie Kirk. You know, I'd say probably 95% of them were, you know, and but that's really how important that Charlie Kirk felt was as far as supporting Nate Morris was going to be. And that happened in Shepherdsville. Again, I want to say it was about 6 weeks before he was tragically assassinated. I always like to tell this story, and I've told several people this. One of the neat things I did notice about Charlie Kirk was he stayed afterwards, and of course my guest today, John Hodgson, was also there for a very specific reason as well, and I'll let John tell that story. But he took the time. Charlie took the time to meet and greet every single person that came. And from just shaking hands to signing books, and he made that time. He was the real deal, and America has lost a patriot and a good brother in the Lord. But anyway, John, share with our folks. I know in the governor's race, you supported Daniel Cameron, a very good man, as well. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little surprised when I saw, and I mean, when I say you support him, you held events and did things like that. But this time around, you are, in essence, doing the same thing with Nate Morris. And talk with our viewers and listeners your reasoning behind that.
Yes, well, I was very involved with Daniel on both the primary and the general for the governor's race last time, and had some discussions with him about the Senate race this time. And I pointed out there are two very different offices. I think Kentuckians look for a different kind of a person in the governor's seat versus the Senate seat. And I'd say the thing that drew me to Nate Morris in this case was that he was very much an outsider. He doesn't owe anybody anything politically. Nobody has, given him jobs or contracts or big donations. Over the years, as a lot of political insiders have experienced, and he can say what he wants to say. He can advocate. He can take hard stances on things. And I think Nate, from his upbringing, grew up here in our area in Louisville and J-Town, and kind of in and around my district. I've got to know him a little bit, and he had, a few rough bumps coming up, like a lot of people did. But more so than that, when he got into the garbage business, his competitors were billionaires like Bill Gates and the actual mafia, like the Sopranos. The mafia is a huge player in the garbage business. So he's been knocked around. He knows how to fight. He knows how to play rough. They say it's sometimes Congress can be like a knife fight in a phone booth. The guy that's got his hand around you is also sticking a knife in your ribs. And Nate is the guy out of the people in this race that I think is smart enough, savvy enough, and tough enough to go deal with that. Where you're going to get pressure, you're going to get threats, you're going to get attempts to compromise you, attempts to make you vote the way you don't want to vote. And I think Nate has got the experience and the toughness and the intelligence to withstand that pressure and to do what he thinks is the right thing to do in the face of a lot of opposition. And that's why I'm backing him in the Senate race.
Yeah, you mentioned his business background, and it is pretty extensive. And of course, there's been a lot of attack ads that's going on right now. Right. From third parties, primarily political action committees. But how might his very real business background, and he is a billionaire, and just national network, because he's a billionaire, he does have a national network of influence. How might that help Kentucky?
Well, I think he's got business connections all over the country and all over the world. Rubicon, the company that he formed to bring high technology to the trash industry, had business in 50 states and 20 foreign countries. So he spent the last 10 or 15 years negotiating in the business world with venture capitalists and billionaires and big business people. So he's got folks he knows all over the place, all over the country, all over the world. And these are the people that are influence players now in politics. If you've noticed, there's a trend here lately for these brilliant young guys, maybe in their 30s or even 40s, coming in. They've made a ton of money doing something, and they say, "Hey, let's get into government. Let's do something different. Let's do something smarter, something better." People like Vivek Ramaswamy that's endorsed him. People like Elon Musk have changed the game. And I notice as I listen to a lot of podcasts, the guys that are really the movers and shakers are much younger than you and I are, Bob. And they have
just a little bit
grown up in this era of technology. Just a little bit. They see opportunities to make quantum changes in the way that we do things, in a way that perhaps
John, we really need
on,
that
but,
right now. For the emergence of AI in particular, that's needed.
Yeah, I mean, our current senator was in office before the internet was invented. Think about that. So we need people that can understand the technology age and how fast things move and how aggressive you need to be. And I think Nate's business background is good for that. He also is a young man in the tech world out in Silicon Valley trying to get investors for his company. He met a hillbilly from Appalachia named J.D. Vance. They were both not involved in the political process at the time, got to know each other, found out they had roots in a similar part of the country and became friends. And long before J.D. ever thought about getting into the politics, he was a young guy out in Silicon Valley. So they've been friends for a long time. And JD called Nate here a little over a year ago and said, hey, he called him first and said, hey, I'm thinking about running for the Senate, told him about that. Then a couple of years later goes, hey, it looks like I might be the vice president. We really need you to run. We need President Trump needs allies in the Senate, hardcore allies. And he convinced Nate to run for the Senate, and he helped him by giving him his political team and consultants and his PR team. And so you will find that most of the Trump universe is aligning with Nate Morris. And I think that's a big signal.
And that's huge. And as Trump would say, and even though there has been to this point no official endorsement, things do seem to be running in that direction. Especially, I know Don Jr. Is also a big fan of Nate Morris. Folks, there's plenty of intrigue on that front. And you know what? When we return, we'll turn to Governor Andy Beshear's recent European trip/vacation and what it could mean to his political ambitions, and a possible special session to address federal funding concerns with the Democrat-led shutdown that's going on right now. Stay with us. Kentucky's Voice continues after this short break. We'll be right back with State Representative John Hodgson. See you in a few.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host today, Bob Scott, with my special guest, State Representative John Hodgson. We've had a very intriguing conversation today. And in fact, folks, if you want to join in the program, you can do so by texting us at 502-571-0970. Again, that text line number is 502-571-0970. If you have a thought or a comment that you'd like to make, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. Also, too, we are, for the most part, an organization that is dependent upon you, the listener, viewer of this program. And if you like what you're hearing, we want to encourage you to text that same number, 502-571-0970, and just type in the word GIVE, GIVE, and you'll be prompted on how to do just that. Your gifts make a huge difference for helping to bring free conservative views to our state. It's interesting. Governor Andy Beshear's recent European trip vacation has made, and I love that. Thank you, Daniel, for putting that up there. Trip vacation has raised eyebrows, both for its timing and its political implication. Is the governor testing the waters for a presidential run? I think we all know the answer to that question. And meanwhile, a potential government shutdown continues to loom. And it's not really potential. It is happening right now. And we're blessed that we have people like John, like Ryan Dotson, state representative from over in the Lexington, Clark County area, that are out there fighting for us. And in fact, Ryan has called or is suggesting a special session might need to happen to address SNAP funding because we have the money. Shortfalls if Washington can't get its act together, or I should say the Democrats in Washington can't get their act together and deliver on the continued resolution to move things forward. But anyway, I do have a clip I want to share from Channel 18. If you would play clip number 4.
Really important. to keep these conversations going, especially with the challenge of tariffs, to make sure our Kentucky goods are bought abroad.
Some of the state's key industries have found themselves on the front lines of the trade war. Bourbon is heavily tariffed and in some parts of the world boycotted altogether. And then manufacturers like Ford are facing tariffs on steel and aluminum. So this week, Beshear has meetings planned across several stops in Europe to meet with trade officials and strengthen relationships. Now, Beshear has been highly critical of President Donald Trump's unpredictable tariff rollout, and he says this trip is needed to smooth things over as tariffs are making trade very complicated and challenging. Beshear says more than 530 facilities in Kentucky are internationally owned. 238 of them are European-owned companies, so the governor says they're focusing on markets that are very important to Kentucky exports.
Representative Hodgson, what's your reaction to Governor Beshear's overseas trip? And was it actually beneficial or to benefit Kentucky, or more about political optics and theater?
Well, I'm going to go with the latter, Bob. I think it was about optics in theater. You know, he spent a bunch of taxpayer money. It costs, I don't know, $45,000 or something like that. I think
$45,000.
Yeah, you know, take him and his family over there and his security detail. You know, you're traveling, you know, at least business class, maybe first class. You know, staying in hotels. It's very expensive traveling to Europe, especially with an entourage. And he did that. And I'll be anxiously waiting to see all the business opportunities he brought back from his trip, which I don't really expect to see any. I think it's laughable to think that he, you know, governor from a small Midwestern state, is going to go smooth things over with European leaders about about tariffs. I mean, you know, President Trump is using tariffs as a lever, as an economic weapon with these folks. You know, we're not. It's
and
not,
I might add, pretty effectively too.
Pretty effectively. It's not, oh my gosh, we forgot how to do free trade. He's using this as a lever, as a weapon to stop them from cheating us the way we've been cheated and taken advantage of for decades. It's the first president that's gotten tough with that. I fully support what he's doing with tariffs. I think international leaders are afraid of Donald Trump because they're not sure what he's going to do. They're not, but they are pretty sure he'll follow through if he makes a threat. So I think the tariffs have been very effective. You've watched our stock price go through the roof. You know, the S&P 500 here lately because they're working. And you know, there's going to be some short-term pain, but Andy Beshear is trying to undermine what Trump is doing as a part of his message. You know, to leverage his credentials to get into the 2028 presidential primary.
You know, he says what he means, and he means what he says. What's that?
I mean, I can't imagine any of these people running for office like the guy in California, Gavin Newsom. You know, he's made such a disaster out of California. He thinks he's going to run the whole country that way. You know, and Andy Beshear is coming to challenge him. You know, great guys, why don't you just go to it in the Democrat primary? We can find out who's got crazier ideas. But
Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yeah, number one on the list though is whatever Trump does, you've got to advocate the opposite, do the opposite. So
yeah. If Trump said, you know what, I'm going to go out and breathe air today, you know, he would have.
Andy would hold his breath.
Yeah, they would. They would. Do you honestly believe Beshear has presidential ambitions, and how would that impact state governments? You know, because it's a long way to the next presidential election.
Well, I think he 100% has presidential ambitions. You know, it dovetails nicely with him leaving office at the end of 27. He has said he's not going to get into the Senate race. You know, if he was planning on hanging around at state level, you know, politics for a while, he would go for another statewide office. He said he's not going to do that. I think he was on the short list for VP under Kamala Harris. I think he was hurt that he didn't get that, but I think he thinks he's got the right stuff. And to be honest, he's one of the 5 most popular Democrat governors in America right now, just because the Republican majority is carrying him. We're passing a lot of great bills. We're doing great things for our tax structure and our economy. And Beshear,
never gets mentioned. That's funny you say that. Never ever gets mentioned in local media that it is you guys that's out on the tip of the spear that's making these things happen.
He literally takes credit for bills that he vetoed. You know, he vetoed, we override his veto, and then when it works, he takes credit for it. So, known the guy for, I don't know, 10 years or so, and I find him to be disingenuous in almost every every interaction we have. He doesn't work with the legislature at all. His people are not over there with us. His eyes are on something else. He's not looking after the state of Kentucky at this point.
Yeah, he really is the consummate politician. Sadly, there's a lot of people in our state that he pretty much has pulled the wool over their eyes, with regard to that. I want to talk briefly about the potential SNAP funding issue, because the Democrat-led and created close down of our federal government. And I can't say that enough, because the continuing resolution is something that they've kicked down the road, I think 12 or 13 times, as far as an agreement to keep the government open. The Republicans didn't do anything with what they had passed at all the other times. I'm talking about the Democrats. But this time, they decided to go ahead because, again, we're coming back to the Trump derangement syndrome issue. Anything that they can do or perceive in their minds to hurt Trump. And again, I don't know if it was Representative Dotson or a bunch of y'all. I think it's a great idea in the event, mainly because we know real life, in need, poor Kentuckians are going to be hurt, as far as SNAP funding, and I know the only way that's going to get through is that the legislature would have to ask the governor to call a special session, so you all could vote to approve, and the money's there to approve this. What are the chances of that happening?
Well, I think certainly the crisis is real, and we do have the money because we balance our budget in Kentucky every 2 years on the budget cycle, and we have a rainy day fund, or the contingency fund, that has about 45 to 60 days worth of operating costs for our state in it. We keep that much cash on hand just in case something happens, or a check doesn't come through, or we have a natural disaster. So I think we've got to very carefully consider what we do with that. We are relatively a poor state. We get a lot more money from the federal government coming in than we send out to the federal government. So I don't think we could replace the federal government's role in all of these things. Normally, the federal government is paying 80 to 90% of the tab, and we're talking about highway construction or, Medicaid or, food stamps. In Kentucky, most states pay a very small percentage. So we can't replace that federal government funding, but we do need to do something. We need to make sure that our citizens, don't go hungry. And I think the leadership of the House and the Senate are going to have to consider that very carefully and look at the budget. And they can request that Beshear call a special session. I don't know that if they will or not, and I don't know if Beshear would grant one. It's completely up to the governor. We can ask all we want, but it's completely up to the governor whether a special session is called or not. But he's not going to do anything. This is a hostage situation. This is a blackmail situation. We have a continuing resolution that Chuck Schumer shut the government down for, where they're asking for us to borrow an additional $1 trillion from the Chinese to extend Medicaid benefits to illegal aliens. And that's essentially what it is. The Republican solution is not great. It borrows $2 trillion from the Chinese to continue the level of spending we've had. I think you've heard Rand Paul object to that. But Democrats are going over.
And Thomas Massey, for that matter.
And Thomas Massey, if you don't pass this extra $1 trillion in spending that none of us voted for last time, we're going to shut the government down. We're going to make people hurt. We're going to make people hungry. We're going to, potentially create civil unrest in your country. I think it's unconscionable that they do that, but they are. They're going ahead, and I think Democrats need to be putting a lot of pressure on the Democrat senators to open things back up. It takes all the Republicans are voting to open the government. All the Republicans, with the exception of one or two, but it takes a 60% vote to get this through the Senate.
All righty then. Well, still ahead, folks. We're going to wrap things up and looking forward towards the 2026 general session coming up on us quickly. From Trump's war on narco-terrorists to medical billing reform, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And this is Kentucky's Voice. I'm Bob Scott, and we're in our final segment with Kentucky State Representative John Hodgson. John, let's talk about what's coming down the pike, both nationally and right here in Frankfort. Before we get to that, though, I'm going to play a clip that everybody's been hearing about. Please play clip 5.
Mr. President, if you are declaring war against these cartels and Congress is likely to approve of that process, why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. You know, they're going to be like dead. Okay?
And that's our president, President Trump, being his usual plain-spoken self. When asked by a reporter what's going on, as far as that declaration of war with regard to, dealing with these narco-terrorists. And quite frankly, I don't think legally or constitutionally, some would argue that he's bound to declare war. If he sees a clear and present danger that's been going on really since the dawn of time, and all presidents have used that. They can move and instruct our military to do exactly what's happening right now. And I know there has been at least 3 strikes on, narco terrorists that were, transporting stuff in to our country. And again, probably could they stop them as far as the Coast Guard is concerned? Yeah, they probably could. But I think this is more about sending a message, to Maduro and pretty much the socialists, Marxists, communists, whatever you want to call them, that has illegally taken over Venezuela and just absolutely disgusting. What they've done with the country. Did you know that, John, that Venezuela was once considered the most prosperous country in South America? At one time, and I've been blessed. I know I got a couple friends that are from there, and they had to literally flee out of that. And I don't want to run too far down this path because we have to cover some other things, but it's absolutely mind-boggling that New York City is on the verge of electing a Marxist mayor in our nation's largest city. And they lie, steal, and cheat and kill if they have to. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but I'm just saying that's what's happened in down through history, without exception, in every single instance when Marxism, socialism, communism, put whatever ism on it you want to, takes over, basically death, destruction, and misery follow. What do you have to say about that, John Hodgson?
That's a fact. They have a way of making a wasteland of whatever country or city or state they take over. They destroy the initiative of human beings to get ahead, by redistributing their income. The state becomes God. The state becomes the primary actor, and they've turned every country that they take over essentially into a wasteland. I mean, they may have some impressive, achievements on the future, like you go to China and you see these, gleaming skyscrapers, but you get a little bit off of Main Street and it's just grinding poverty, crumbling buildings, things like that. I've had the opportunity to, look around in some of the other countries, and nobody's got it like we've got it here. But the communists are very effective at taking a prosperous country and turning it into a third world nation.
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to do here. Right. It's 100% an agenda that's going on. what's your response to Trump's latest stance on narco-terrorism, and could this influence potentially state-level anti-drug efforts?
So first off, I think Trump is doing exactly what presidents have done for hundreds of years, including Thomas Jefferson, who was pretty familiar with the Constitution and what was intended there. The threat at the time, the narco-terrorists of that time, were the Barbary pirates. They were attacking our shipping in the Mediterranean. They were taking people hostage, holding them for ransom. They were, stealing from the ships. And Thomas Jefferson, with no declaration of war for Congress, sent the Navy over there. The Marine hymn from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Well, the shores of Tripoli were the Barbary pirates. That's where they went in. They killed them. They blew them up, and made war on the pirates, not on the nation, but on the pirates, who were stateless pirates, and they didn't want to play anymore, so they quit. Some 10 years later, I think somebody tried it again around 1815 as a part of a war going on in Europe. Then shut them down the second time. Again, no declaration of war. You can't say that Thomas Jefferson and his successors weren't familiar with the Constitution. For goodness sakes, they were there when it was, written. So this is another case of Trump derangement syndrome. He's doing what I think is a great thing. He's not sending a land army to invade Venezuela. He's got narco terrorists that are 200 miles outside the territorial water of Venezuela that are driving drug boats, and he's killing them. I think that's terrific.
Real quick. No, I'm just wondering what's your because there has been for sure a huge military buildup around Venezuela. Is that a case of Trump just sending signals and doing what? And there's also, I might add, I think it's a $50 million reward that's been placed on the head of Maduro and his government down there. What are your thoughts about all of that?
Well, I think the military buildup, that's the projection of power. If you remember, Teddy Roosevelt around 1900 sent the Great White Fleet around the world, basically to intimidate, to say, hey, look, we're big, we're powerful, don't mess with us, projecting peace through strength. Ronald Reagan did the same kind of thing. We typically send aircraft carrier attack groups into areas, basically saying, we've got some very advanced technology, we're the most powerful military in the world, don't mess with us. Doesn't mean they're going to get invaded, it just means, leave us alone. And I think peace through strength is the way to go. If Maduro is in fact the head of this criminal syndicate down there, which he very well may be, maybe putting a price on his head is appropriate. Just the fact that he has somehow installed himself as the dictator of a third world communist country doesn't make him immune from such behavior.
Yeah, and he basically overrode a legal election that they estimate his opponent, who just recently, by the way, won the Nobel Peace Prize, and said Trump should have got it, but she, in my opinion, is a very brave woman. It's amazing she's even still alive. But and she had to flee the country because they estimate that she won with at least 70% of the vote down there. Wow. But he's clearly a dictator. And I do want to get on to, you've got some important legislation coming up. How is a legislature in particular preparing to address medical billing reform in the upcoming session?
Yeah, this is something that I've recently discovered that I'm the same age as old people. You may have noticed this too. And
funny how that happens.
I get extensive blood tests several times a year. Well, I noticed that I would get from the lab company, they would send me multiple bills. Well, my insurance company will break it down to 4, 5, 6 different claims and show me on each one, what the payout is, and here's your portion and our portion, and pretty clearly lay it out. Well, the lab company, it's like they're not speaking that language, and they keep sending me bills for random amounts.
Yes.
None of them match what the insurance is saying. It's very confusing, and sometimes I pay one, it's like $11.20. Okay, I'll write them a check. Well, then I get another bill for the same lab draw that's $400. It's like, whoa, I just paid this yesterday. What's going on? And it turns out everybody's having that experience. Even my doctor, even my medical providers on their personal stuff. You talk to anybody who's at the age where you're getting cholesterol tests and all that stuff, you get multiple confusing bills from the lab. They don't acknowledge your payments, and they want more money. So that is called balance billing. It's an unscrupulous business practice where, let's say there's a blood test that they charge $100 for. The insurance has a negotiated rate. They know this is really only $12. So the insurance pays them $12. They say you go about your business. Well, the lab company is not satisfied with that. They want more money out of you, so they'll just keep sending you a bill until you pay something. Now, eventually somebody audits that and they might send you a refund or they might not. You'll never know. But I guarantee you people that are 65, 75, 85 getting these bills, they see a bill that says overdue and they think, oh my gosh, I better pay that. Well, I've fallen victim to that myself. And they routinely, this is part of their business practice, they overbill. Maybe they refund, maybe they don't, but they're playing games to satisfy their shareholders, trying to boost their revenue at the end of the quarter. And on the other end, they will delay payments, to doctors and things like that to, boost their revenue also. So this medical billing transparency is going to make sure, particularly for labs, that they've got to send you a clear bill, say what you've paid, what the insurance has paid, and it would make it illegal for them to bill you more than the negotiated rate. But it's really a simple thing.
Yeah. What do we need to do to get that across the finish line, John? And we only have a couple minutes to go.
Yeah, I would say if you've had experiences with this where it's clearly a case of just confusing, maybe fraudulent billing, let me know. Send me an email to my legislative address. And I would like to have a pile of these things saying this is not an isolated incident. I mean, virtually everybody I've talked to about this goes, oh yeah, the same thing happens to me. And people say, yeah, their billing organizations are basically criminal operations just designed to defraud people. And if you pay, it's kind of on you. So, but right now, in my personal situation, I've got a couple of bills they say are outstanding that I show them evidence I've already paid, and they're putting me in collections. So I'm taking a hit on my credit rating for that. But it's stupid. I could pay the $11.20 and probably make them go away for a little bit, but then they come right back with another bill for $400. And it's almost like they see that as a sign of weakness that you've paid something, and they'll bill you even more. Even though my insurance company says I'm completely clear, I paid everything I'm supposed to pay. And
what's your message, John? We have a little over a minute to go in the show to Kentuckians who are looking for leadership and accountability in the months ahead.
Yeah, I'd say make your voice heard to your legislator. If I'm your legislator, write me. If not, write your state.
Very important, folks. Very important.
Tell them what's important to you. Tell them what's important to you. Just email is probably the best way to get a hold of people. But say, this is important to me. I'd like to see a bill on this. I don't want to see a bill on that. I get messages every day, but there's a lot of people who don't sound off until the session's over. I get people writing me angry about something in April or May. It's like, hey, where were you? We were in session for 3 months and I didn't hear from you. But yes, by all means, and particularly on this medical thing, if you've had these fraudulent billing experiences, shoot me an email.
Amen. Representative John Hodgson, always great to have you with us. Thanks for your time and insight today. And all of our listeners, thank you for joining us this Monday morning. I'm Bob Scott. This is Kentucky's Voice. Stay informed, stay engaged, and always, always, always stay proud to call Kentucky home. God bless you. Thanks for joining us today. And reach out to those state legislators, too. Let your voice be heard. God bless. See you tomorrow. Same time, same place.